ChatGPT doesn't have a perspective. It has a data set.
ChatGPT definitely makes it easier for anyone to create a book, but I think to actually create something that's very, very high quality, then you need that human collaboration.
Let's say it only takes her 10% of the time to make these illustrations now if she's leveraging these AI tools. Then if you're being paid by the hour, then that's going to be a problem because then you need to get 10 times more clients.
I've been taking care of a cat for my dog sitting business. They reached out. Apparently, one of their friends had a dog that I'd been taking care of. And this cat is the most spoiled cat I've ever met in my entire life. When you walk into their apartment, you just see Wilson everywhere. That's his name. On the blankets, pictures. They even recently got a Lego Wilson sculpture. I had an idea for a picture book. I think it was a family idea. I think you contributed a little and my dad contributed, taking the experience from my own life of sitting in a comfortable house with all the different kinds of food I could ever want to eat. And very comfortable, cushy life, just like Wilson.
Right.
So it's the perfect backdrop to try and, teach some kind of lesson. They can relate to Wilson's life. I got a drawing pad for Christmas from you, actually, this drawing pad that you can plug into my computer and I can draw. So I've been working on this picture book, and I pretty much have zero experience with illustrating digitally.
We've done some photoshopping in Canva.
That's true.
Which I guess is Canva-ing, not photoshopping.
Yeah, but I like to draw and I like to make little cartoons and comics. So it's I can make a picture book, easy peasy.
In order to sort of make those professional illustrations, you wanted to try using ChatGPT, and that's what you started doing, which actually surprised me to hear about because we had tried using ChatGPT for image generation, and it can give you something that's okay, but it's usually not what you wanted, in terms of exactly what you were thinking about.
Really cool pictures, but
right.
A lot of the time it's not at all what you wanted.
Yeah.
I programmed a little game once, and I used ChatGPT to make the images, and I had to switch up the game a little bit because it just couldn't make 3 paths in the picture. It could only make 2 for some reason.
Right,
I was
right.
Okay, I guess we're just going to have 2 paths.
Right.
So, I tried it out. It wasn't the original plan because of my experience. I was well, it's unlikely that I'd actually get it to be able to do what I wanted, which is to just refine my picture and not change it at all.
But it's also been getting better. So
yeah, it was getting a lot better. So the first few times I tried doing it, it didn't work at all.
Yeah.
It would completely change the facial expression, which is really important in these illustrations and these books to try and communicate the mood. So instead of it be sleeping, it would look like this. Or something like that.
Right, yeah.
It's okay, what did you just do?
Yeah.
And so basically my process, which I've been developing, just from iterating and improving, was I draw a picture, make it the best that I can, ask ChatGPT to refine it, and then if there are any fix-ups that I need that I can do, I can just do that manually. Yeah. So I can, erase the face, fix it again, and then it's easier, and then it still looks really professional.
Right. And part of what you were telling me about is how you were watching this YouTube channel of a full-time illustrator, and how so many people are this is my dream job, and we're also there's a lot of kids who love drawing and want to be an illustrator, or want to be able
an artist when I grow up.
Right.
And that's
and then also a lot of people who are saying these jobs are all going to disappear.
Yeah. Right. This is kind of I think this is a great example of exactly what these people are saying. These jobs are going to disappear because this lady, she I actually really like her YouTube channel. It makes very high quality videos. But there's this one day at the life where basically she's saying she wakes up, gets a cup of tea, and then draws for
Right.
hours
Right.
straight, because she was like working on I think she was making illustrations for a picture book for an author, and she's actually a full-time illustrator who gets paid to do this stuff, and it's
Right.
like, okay, how is she managing to make a living with ChatGPT that's able to make pictures out there? And I think one thing we started breaking down was like, what does an illustrator actually provide? Because from my perspective of being a professional illustrator, there are a few things that you need to do that's a little bit more than just making pictures.
Yeah, well, I think that part of it is that when you're thinking about getting in, a professional to help you with as an author, a part of what you want is their creative input and their intuition as to what would be the kind of illustration that you want. Because sometimes you're like, I have the perfect vision, but it's like, oftentimes it's like, okay, if you're an author, you focus on the story, and you're like, okay, well, then how does this actually, what would be the best way for me to try to present this visually, right? And being able to get that sort of input from somebody who has experience with that, right?
Especially with like the kind of book that I'm making, which is, with picture books, you don't have a lot of words on the page. It's usually like a sentence or a couple sentences each page, and then you've got to actually bring the story to life through the pictures, and like you can play around with the angles, and like based on that, you're gonna be communicating very different emotions, so that is something that I realize is like I've got to really channel my creative vision here. I can't just rely on ChatGPT to do all the work.
Yeah. Well, especially if you have what is a creative vision, that's when you're like not very flexible on the details. If you're just like, just generate an image for something, it's like, okay, then I'll give you like something roughly approximating that.
Yeah.
But that's not a creative vision. That's
I cannot deal with that. No. This is my book. Okay, you're not going to be messing it up, ChatGPT. Yeah. Those whiskers are out of place. There's a slight out of place, and that cannot be allowed.
Right.
But it did make it a ton easier when I was able to actually, like, after it had practiced a little bit, and I've gotten a few pictures of Wilson and from different angles, it started to do a lot better, and it saved me a lot of time because I can make kind of like the rough illustration, which, still takes a decent amount of time, but not as much as it would take to do that, plus going over like and perfecting every single little line and every single little detail, which is something that ChatGPT could do really easily and just in a few seconds if I got the prompt right.
Right, yeah, and that's something that I think is another thing that, being able to also have that creative energy in terms of like, if you're an author, you're working with an illustrator, one thing that is like being able to, the visuals is inspiring the story and the story is inspiring the visuals, and you're able to like build off each other in that sort of way. And that's something that like, sure, you could try to do with ChatGPT, but it's still something that I watched this video where this guy was talking about where does creativity really come from, and in terms of like what is art and what is music. It's not just, this is a pretty picture and this is a nice sounding song. It's like you're hearing somebody's perspective, right? And ChatGPT doesn't have a perspective. It has a data set. And it has, its model that's been trained. But that's not a sort of like, certain things are going to be more in the front of your mind than it is for anybody else in terms of what sorts of details that you really consider to be important, right? Because I generally don't care about whisker positioning, right? But you're
you don't care about whisker positioning, but with your writing, you're definitely caring about the tone that comes across, and like this change the wording a little bit, and it can completely change the tone.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And so you don't want to be coming across in a way you don't want, and that's the same thing with the Wilson book,
and that's part of what makes people care about these stories, is that there's a person behind it that's really trying to express something.
But whereas and it's not just like you can think about a person being there, but you can't actually tell on the page. Like you can tell if there's some if it's not just a bunch of fluff.
Right.
And I think that's something where it really makes the creative vision extremely valuable.
Right.
Like that's where I think the illustrator, someone who has a lot of practice making pictures, this is just from my experience of making pictures and working on this book, but someone who has that experience, who's actually thinking about, expressing those creative visions through illustrations, can do that really well, and they build that intuition, which I think is really valuable. So if you have that creative vision and you know how to communicate it through a certain form of communication, like pictures, or that people do this in movies too, and photography, where they change the angle and then it looks really cool.
Right.
And it's like, and it's like if you go really close up on the footsteps in the spooky movie scene,
Right.
then like really close up on the darkness and the weird shadows, then it makes it really spooky.
Right.
And same kind of thing.
Right. And if you have that intuition, then you can prompt the models to get what you want.
Exactly.
But otherwise, it's kind of like, okay, like, just give me this, and it's like, okay, but then you need some sort of basis. You kind of need to give it that creativity, that creative aspect, which doesn't have to take that much work, as you were saying, in terms of giving it a rough sketch of like, here's the sort of angle that I want, right? But then also in terms of all the subtleties.
It's not a linear thing in terms of you do this much work and you'll get this far. Right. Sometimes I can create a few pictures really easily if it's from a generic angle.
Right.
And then I get very far. Sometimes it takes me hours because I'm prompt engineering because the stupid ChatGPT won't get the angle right, you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes but it's not a linear thing, which I think is the thing that changed.
And I think that's part of why we're thinking about then how is compensation going to work? Because if you're taking the example of this full-time illustrator, right? Let's say it only takes her 10% of the time to make these illustrations now if she's leveraging these AI tools, right? And it's like, okay, then if you're being paid by the hour, then that's going to be a problem, because then you need to get 10 times more clients, right? And so obviously that might be a problem, but at the same time, I think that's part of this is seeing how the nature of compensation needs to change to adapt, because as you're saying, it's not linear anymore, right? It's about leveraging your decisions, your ideas, and your intuition and creativity, right? And so then a lot of work in terms of those thoughts and those ideas is very concentrated, right? And then that can be scaled.
It's more about like actually engaging with the author and like really honing in on that creative vision. Like, what do you really want to express? And that collaboration is very important, because you need that collaboration in order to like figure out what would actually be best, what picture really communicates what I'm trying to communicate,
right?
And being able to build, the author and the illustrator build on each other like that, like that's what I'm thinking is like the ideal kind of dynamic that you want,
right? And those are like
is very very valuable.
And those are the two things that that AI doesn't have, is like it's the creative intelligence and it's the emotional intelligence of like being able to engage with an actual other human, right? That can help to carry their own perspective, right? And the fact that this other person has a perspective that might clash with yours is actually really important, because the fact that ChatGPT can just kind of like adapt to you and give you what you want, that's not what you want in terms of in order to be challenged as to how do I make this illustration something that resonates with more than just myself, but more broadly, right?
Especially if like you're from the author's perspective, what if they don't have the intuition with illustration,
right?
That's the reason why
and you've been working so long on this story, and so it's hard to think about it from someone's perspective, seeing it it with fresh eyes, right? And so being able to get that perspective is really important. So like having a perspective even that clashes with yours is actually a good thing, right? That's part of the beauty and sometimes the very annoying aspect of human beings, but it's like, no, it is valuable. And I think that's part of what we're thinking about in terms of, okay, then what does compensation look like, right? Because it's not about, okay, being just paid by the hour, because that's not how value creation works in these scaled environments. And I think that a lot more and more, it's going to be more about having a stake in something, where it's like, okay, if you as an illustrator are going to get a % revenue as to sales on a book that you're illustrating, you're also going to be a lot more motivated to try to, really help the author with your illustrations.
Like, I'm part of the team. This is also my creation.
Yeah, and it is, you know, and if you're not just getting something like just following directions of here's the picture that I want, because if you just have directions and you're not having that more creative collaborative aspect, then you could just use ChatGPT and bypass needing a intermediary in the first place, right?
If you're okay with just like, it doesn't totally fit my vision.
Right.
It's a little bit off, but whatever.
Or I don't really have a vision, but I need a picture for this, right? And that's like, okay, that's fine. But that's not how the best creations are made.
Yeah.
Right? And that's something where I think that then it also is interesting to think about from the illustrator's perspective. It's not just I'm a contractor for this book, but I'm also building my own portfolio with each new person that I'm getting, that where I actually have a stake in this, right? And I think that's really cool, and that's also really, but I think that part of it is it requires a shifting in mindset, because one, it's less certain in terms of compensation. If you're getting % revenue, you can't know exactly how many books are going to sell, right? And people like that sort of certainty, and I think that that's part of, that's where what we put in our, our yo-yo dance podcast when we're talking about how like a lot of overcoming being in this new world is getting more and more comfortable with uncertainty. And the reason why is because you have so much more potential in those sorts of environments, right?
And I think there's going to be ChatGPT definitely makes it easier for anyone to create a book. But I think to actually create something that's very, very high quality and something that, is like one of these great pieces of work, then you need that human collaboration to iterate and improve it to the best version that it can be. And so, yes, these AI tools and this technology makes it a lot easier for anyone to do this, but you still need that human aspect of it, and that intuition aspect of it, and that clashing to make it really amazing. And I like that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah,